In the rolling hills of Robertson County, Tennessee, during the early 1800s, a prosperous farmer named John Bell lived peacefully with his family. The Bell farm was known throughout Adams, Tennessee for its fertile land and successful crops. John Bell was a respected member of the community, serving as a church elder and maintaining strong relationships with his neighbors. His family included his wife Lucy and their children, with daughter Betsy being particularly close to her father. Little did they know that their quiet rural life was about to become the center of one of America's most documented supernatural cases. It all began in 1817 when John Bell encountered something peculiar while inspecting his cornfield. Among the tall stalks, he spotted an unusual animal, part dog, part rabbit, unlike anything he had ever seen before. The creature's eyes seemed to gleam with an otherworldly intelligence. When Bell raised his rifle and fired, the strange beast vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. That very night, the Bell family heard mysterious knocking sounds coming from the walls of their log cabin. The sounds were rhythmic, deliberate, and seemed to move from room to room as if something was walking through the very structure of their home. As weeks passed, the supernatural activity escalated dramatically. The invisible presence began pulling blankets off sleeping family members, slapping and pinching them in their beds. Young Betsy Bell became a particular target, often waking up with red marks on her face and arms. The entity seemed to take pleasure in tormenting her, pulling her hair so violently that witnesses could see her head being yanked about by unseen hands. Chairs would move across rooms on their own, and the family's belongings would disappear, only to reappear in impossible locations. The Bell family tried to keep the incident secret, but the disturbances grew so violent that they could no longer hide what was happening. After months of mysterious sounds and physical attacks, the entity began to speak. At first, it was just whispers and mumbling, barely audible words that seemed to come from nowhere. Gradually, the voice grew stronger and clearer, revealing itself to be that of a woman with a distinctive southern accent. The spirit claimed to be Kate Batts, a local woman who had died years earlier and harbored a deep grudge against John Bell over a land dispute. The voice was often crude and vindictive, cursing at family members and visitors alike. It demonstrated an uncanny knowledge of the Bible, often quoting scriptures, and could carry on conversations with multiple people simultaneously, as if it possessed supernatural intelligence. Despite the family's attempts at secrecy, news of the Bell Witch spread throughout Robertson County and beyond. Neighbors, friends, and curious strangers began visiting the Bell farm to witness the phenomena for themselves. The entity seemed to relish the attention, often performing for crowds by moving objects, speaking to visitors by name, and revealing personal secrets about people it had never met. Local ministers came to investigate, and even skeptics left the Bell home convinced that something supernatural was indeed occurring. The story reached such prominence that it attracted the attention of high-ranking officials, including military officers and politicians from Nashville. Perhaps the most famous visitor to the Bell farm was General Andrew Jackson, the future President of the United States. Jackson arrived with a wagon full of men, including a professional witch layer who boasted he could rid the family of their supernatural tormentor. As Jackson's party approached the Bell property, their wagon wheels suddenly locked up and refused to turn, despite the horses straining against their harnesses. The invisible entity's voice rang out across the fields, welcoming Jackson by name and inviting him to stay the night. That evening, the witch layer attempted to confront the spirit, but the entity quickly turned the tables, slapping and terrorizing the man until he fled in terror. Jackson reportedly planned to stay several days but left the next morning, later saying he would rather fight the entire British Army than deal with the Bell Witch again. Throughout the 4-year haunting, the Bell Witch maintained a particular obsession with Betsy Bell, who was a teenager during the peak of the activity. The entity seemed determined to control every aspect of Betsy's life, especially her romantic relationships. When Betsy became engaged to a young man named Joshua Gardner, the witch's attacks intensified dramatically. The spirit would torment Betsy whenever Joshua visited, creating such chaos that the young couple could rarely spend time together peacefully. The witch would whisper threats and curses, promising to make Betsy's life miserable if she married Joshua. Eventually, under the constant supernatural pressure and fearing for her family's safety, Betsy broke off her engagement, much to the witch's apparent satisfaction. While the entity tormented the entire family, it reserved its most vicious attacks for John Bell himself. The witch claimed that it had come specifically to kill John Bell, and it seemed determined to fulfill that promise. Bell's health began to deteriorate rapidly under the constant supernatural assault. He suffered from facial twitching, difficulty swallowing, and episodes where his tongue would swell so severely he could barely speak. The witch would often be heard cackling with glee during these attacks, taking credit for Bell's declining condition. Neighbors and family members watched helplessly as the once robust farmer grew weaker and more frail with each passing month. On December 20th, 1820, John Bell was found dead in his bed, apparently having died peacefully in his sleep. However, the circumstances surrounding his death were far from peaceful. The family discovered a mysterious vial of dark liquid in the medicine cabinet that no one could identify. When they asked the Bell Witch about the strange substance, the entity's voice rang out with triumphant laughter, claiming responsibility for Bell's death. The witch boasted that it had poisoned John Bell, giving him a dose of the mysterious liquid while he slept. To prove its claim, the entity dared the family to give some of the liquid to the family cat. When they did, the cat died instantly in convulsions, confirming the witch's deadly confession. After John Bell's death, the Bell Witch's activity began to gradually decrease, though it remained present for several more months. The entity seemed satisfied with having achieved its primary goal of killing John Bell, and its attention turned to making final arrangements. In early 1821, the witch announced that it would be leaving the Bell family, but promised to return in 7 years to visit. The spirit's voice grew fainter and less frequent, until finally it fell silent altogether. The Bell family was left to rebuild their lives and cope with the trauma of their 4-year ordeal. True to its word, the entity briefly returned in 1828, but the manifestations were much milder and lasted only a few weeks before disappearing forever. The Bell Witch haunting became one of the most thoroughly documented supernatural cases in American history. Unlike many ghost stories that rely on hearsay and legend, the Bell Witch phenomena was witnessed by hundreds of people, including respected community leaders, ministers, and even a future president. The story has been passed down through generations, inspiring countless books, movies, and investigations. The Bell Farm itself became a pilgrimage site for paranormal enthusiasts and historians alike. Today, the legend of the Bell Witch continues to captivate audiences, serving as a chilling reminder of one family's encounter with forces beyond human understanding. What happened to the Bell family between 1817 and 1821 remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Whether the Bell Witch was a genuine supernatural entity, an elaborate hoax, or a case of mass hysteria, the impact on the Bell family and the surrounding community was undeniably real. The meticulous documentation of events, the credibility of witnesses, and the consistency of accounts across multiple sources make the Bell Witch case unique in the annals of paranormal history. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the story is not just what happened, but the lingering question of whether such forces still exist in our world today, waiting to emerge when conditions are right. The Bell Witch of Tennessee stands as a testament to the enduring power of the unknown and the thin line between the natural and supernatural worlds. In the remote countryside of Essex, England, stood a imposing Victorian Gothic mansion that would become known as the most haunted house in all of England. Borley Rectory was built in 1862 by Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull on the site of an ancient monastery. The red brick building, with its towering spires and dark windows, seemed to brood over the surrounding landscape like something from a Gothic novel. From the very beginning, there was something unsettling about the place. Local villagers whispered about strange lights seen in the windows at night, and an atmosphere of unease that seemed to permeate the very walls of the building. Little did anyone know that this rectory would become the center of one of the most extensively documented hauntings in British history. Reverend Henry Bull and his family were the first to experience the supernatural phenomena that would plague Borley Rectory for decades. The Bull family, which eventually included 14 children, reported numerous strange occurrences almost immediately after moving in. They spoke of phantom footsteps echoing through the corridors at night, mysterious figures glimpsed in the gardens, and the sound of a phantom coach and horses that would arrive at the rectory entrance, only to vanish when investigated. The most frequently reported apparition was that of a nun, dressed in the traditional black and white habit, who would glide silently through the grounds. She was often seen walking along what became known as the Nun's Walk, a path that ran alongside the rectory. The Bull family surprisingly seemed to accept these supernatural visitors as part of their daily life, often speaking of them matter-of-factly to visitors and neighbors. The most persistent and well-documented spirit at Borley Rectory was the Phantom Nun, whose tragic story became central to the rectory's haunted reputation. According to local legend, in the 13th century, a Benedictine monastery stood on the site where the rectory was later built. The story told of a young nun from the nearby Bury's convent who had fallen in love with a monk from Borley Monastery. The couple planned to elope, arranging for a coach to meet them at the monastery grounds. However, their forbidden romance was discovered before they could escape. As punishment for their transgression, the monk was hanged, the coachman was beheaded, and the nun was bricked up alive in the walls of the convent. It was said that her restless spirit returned to walk the grounds where she had once hoped to find freedom and love, forever searching for her lost beloved. The rectory's reputation as a haunted house reached new heights when Harry Price, Britain's most famous paranormal investigator, first visited Borley in 1929. Price was called in by the Daily Mail newspaper to investigate reports of supernatural activity. During his initial visit, Price and his team witnessed remarkable phenomena that defied conventional explanation. Objects moved on their own, including a candlestick that flew across a room and struck a wall. Strange writing appeared on walls, often in childish handwriting, with messages like "Mary Ann, please get help," and "please get help." The temperature in certain rooms would drop dramatically without explanation, and witnesses reported seeing shadowy figures moving through the corridors. Price was so impressed by what he witnessed that he declared Borley Rectory the most haunted house in England, a title that would stick for decades to come. In 1930, Reverend Lionel Foyster moved into Borley Rectory with his much younger wife, Mary Ann, and their adopted daughter, Adelaide. The Foyster family's 5-year tenure would prove to be the most active period in the rectory's haunted history. The phenomena that plagued the family were both frequent and violent. Mary Ann became the primary target of the supernatural activity, suffering physical attacks that left her with bruises and scratches. Objects would be thrown at her, including stones, books, and even heavy pieces of furniture. The mysterious wall writings increased dramatically during this period, with messages appearing almost daily, many of them addressed specifically to Mary Ann. The family endured bell ringing at all hours, phantom footsteps, and the sound of voices calling out in the night. The activity became so intense that the Foysters were forced to sleep in different rooms each night, never knowing where the next disturbance would occur. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Borley haunting was the appearance of mysterious messages written on the walls throughout the rectory. These writings would appear overnight, often in pencil or crayon, written in what appeared to be a childish hand. The messages were frequently addressed to Mary Ann Foyster, with pleas for help and requests for prayers. Some of the most notable messages included, "Mary Ann, please help get," "Light Mass prayers," and "Please help get." The handwriting was analyzed by experts who determined that it was consistent throughout the years, suggesting a single source. What made these writings particularly mysterious was that they would appear in locked rooms, in places too high for anyone to reach without a ladder, and sometimes on freshly painted walls where wet paint showed no signs of disturbance around the writing. Determined to conduct the most thorough paranormal investigation ever attempted, Harry Price leased Borley Rectory from 1937 to 1939. He assembled a team of trained observers, including academics, scientists, and skilled investigators, who would take turns staying at the rectory to monitor and document any supernatural activity. Price equipped the rectory with the latest scientific instruments of the time, including cameras, thermometers, and motion detection devices. The team maintained detailed logs of every incident, photographed phenomena, and created floor plans marking the locations of supernatural events. During this period, they documented hundreds of incidents, including the famous Borley bells recordings, where phantom bell ringing was captured on primitive recording equipment. The investigation was groundbreaking in its systematic approach to documenting paranormal activity. During Price's investigation, several seances were conducted at the rectory in attempts to communicate with the spirits. The most significant session, held in 1938, allegedly made contact with the spirit of a French nun named Marie Laire. Through the medium, Marie told a story that differed from the traditional nun legend. She claimed to have been murdered at the rectory in 1667, not in medieval times as previously believed. According to Marie's account, she had been strangled and her body buried in the rectory gardens. The spirit claimed that she could not rest until her remains were found and given proper burial. This revelation added a new dimension to the haunting, suggesting that the phenomena were connected to a more recent tragedy than the medieval monastery legend that had been associated with the site. On February 27, 1939, Borley Rectory was destroyed in a devastating fire that began in the hallway and quickly spread throughout the building. The fire started when the new owner, Captain William Gregson, accidentally knocked over an oil lamp while unpacking books in the library. Within hours, the famous rectory was reduced to smoldering ruins. However, even the destruction of the building did not end the supernatural activity. Witnesses reported seeing phantom figures in the ruins, and the ghostly nun was allegedly spotted walking among the burnt timbers. Local firefighters and police officers who worked at the scene reported strange experiences, including the sound of footsteps in the empty ruins and the sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. The fire seemed to mark the end of an era, but not the end of the haunting. In the months following the fire, investigations of the rectory ruins led to remarkable discoveries that seemed to validate some of the supernatural claims. Workers clearing the debris found human remains buried in the cellars, including what appeared to be a female skull and jawbone. These remains were examined by pathologists who determined they belonged to a young woman who had died several centuries earlier. The discovery seemed to support the claims made during the seances about Marie Laire's murdered remains being hidden at the rectory. The bones were given a proper Christian burial in Liston churchyard, and some investigators reported a noticeable decrease in supernatural activity following the burial. However, reports of ghostly phenomena in the area continued sporadically for years after the rectory's destruction. Despite the extensive documentation, the Borley Rectory case has faced significant skepticism from researchers and paranormal investigators. Critics have pointed out inconsistencies in witness testimonies, questioned the reliability of some observers, and suggested that Harry Price may have exaggerated or even fabricated some of the phenomena to enhance his reputation. Some of the physical evidence, including photographs of supposed apparitions, have been analyzed and deemed inconclusive or potentially fraudulent. The Society for Psychical Research conducted their own investigation and concluded that while some unexplained events may have occurred, many of the reported phenomena could be attributed to natural causes, hoaxes, or psychological factors. This skepticism has led to ongoing debates about the true nature of the Borley haunting and the reliability of the evidence collected during the investigations. Today, only the foundations and a few scattered bricks remain of the original Borley Rectory, but its legend lives on as one of the most famous haunted locations in the world. The case helped establish modern paranormal investigation techniques and demonstrated the importance of systematic documentation in supernatural research. The rectory has inspired countless books, documentaries, and films, cementing its place in popular culture. While skeptics continue to debate the authenticity of the phenomena, believers point to the sheer volume of witnesses and the consistency of reports over nearly 8 decades. The Borley Rectory case remains a fascinating example of how a single location can capture the public imagination and challenge our understanding of the boundary between the natural and supernatural worlds. Whether the rectory was truly haunted or simply the product of suggestion and folklore, its impact on paranormal research and popular culture is undeniable. In the windswept countryside of Norfolk, England, stands one of Britain's most magnificent stately homes and arguably its most haunted. Raynham Hall, built in the 1630s, has been the ancestral seat of the Townsend family for over 4 centuries. This imposing Jacobean mansion, with its distinctive red brick facade and towering chimneys, harbors one of the most famous ghost stories in English history. The specter known as the Brown Lady has walked these halls for nearly 2 centuries, her tragic tale intertwined with the very foundations of this grand estate. What makes Raynham Hall unique among haunted locations is not just the persistence of the supernatural activity, but the fact that one of the most compelling pieces of photographic evidence of a ghost was captured within these very walls. The story of the Brown Lady begins in the early 18th century with Lady Dorothy Walpole, sister of Britain's first Prime Minister, Sir Robert Walpole. In 1713, Dorothy married Charles Townshend, the second Viscount Townshend, in what appeared to be a happy union. However, their marriage was destined for tragedy. Dorothy was known for her beauty, intelligence, and vivacious spirit, but she was also rumored to have had affairs, particularly with Lord Wharton. When Charles discovered her infidelities, he became consumed with jealousy and rage. According to legend, he confined Dorothy to her rooms in Raynham Hall, essentially making her a prisoner in her own home. She spent her final years in isolation, forbidden from seeing her children or leaving the estate. Dorothy died in 1726 under mysterious circumstances, with some claiming she was pushed down the grand staircase, while others suggest she died of a broken heart, forever trapped within the walls that had become her prison. The first recorded sightings of the Brown Lady began over a century after Dorothy's death, during the 1830s. The ghost earned her name from the brown brocade dress she was consistently seen wearing, a fashion typical of the early 18th century. In 1835, Colonel Loftus, a guest at Raynham Hall, reported seeing a woman in brown walking through the corridors late at night. What made his account particularly chilling was his description of her face, or rather, the lack thereof. Where her eyes should have been, Loftus claimed there were only dark, hollow sockets that seemed to stare into his very soul. The sightings continued throughout the 1840s, with multiple guests and family members reporting encounters with the mysterious lady. She was most frequently seen on the grand staircase, gliding down the steps with an otherworldly grace, her brown dress rustling as she moved. One of the most dramatic encounters with the Brown Lady occurred in 1849 when Captain Frederick Marryat, a renowned naval officer and novelist, was staying at Raynham Hall. Marryat was a skeptic who had come to the estate specifically to investigate the ghost stories and debunk what he believed to be mere superstition. Armed with a pistol, he patrolled the corridors at night, determined to prove that the Brown Lady was nothing more than an elaborate hoax. On his second night, Marryat encountered 2 young men in the hallway who warned him that the Brown Lady was approaching. As they all pressed against the wall to let her pass, Marryat saw the phantom figure gliding toward them. Unable to contain himself, he raised his pistol and fired directly at the apparition. The bullet passed harmlessly through the specter and lodged itself in the door behind her. The Brown Lady turned, looked directly at Marryat with her hollow eye sockets, and smiled malevolently before vanishing into thin air. Throughout the Victorian era, sightings of the Brown Lady continued with remarkable consistency. Guests at Raynham Hall reported seeing her in various parts of the house, but most commonly on the grand staircase and in the corridors of the upper floors. The 4th Marquess Townshend and his family became reluctant to discuss the hauntings publicly, fearing it would damage their reputation and discourage visitors. However, privately, they acknowledged that something supernatural was indeed occurring within their ancestral home. Servants reported finding doors that had been locked the night before standing wide open, cold spots in rooms that had no explanation, and the sound of rustling silk dresses in empty corridors. The Brown Lady seemed to be most active during the winter months, when the long Norfolk nights cast deep shadows throughout the mansion's numerous rooms and passageways. The most famous and controversial piece of evidence in the Brown Lady case emerged on September 19, 1936, when photographers Captain Provan and Indra Shira were commissioned by Country Life magazine to photograph the interior of Raynham Hall. The photographers were working on the grand staircase when Shira suddenly exclaimed that he could see a figure descending the stairs. Although Provan could see nothing, he quickly removed the lens cap and took a photograph based on his colleagues' urgent directions. When the photograph was developed, it revealed what appeared to be a translucent figure of a woman in period dress descending the staircase. The image, which became known as the Brown Lady photograph, showed a ghostly figure with clearly visible features of a dress and what appeared to be a face with dark, hollow areas where the eyes should be. This photograph became one of the most analyzed and debated pieces of supernatural evidence in history. The Brown Lady photograph has been subjected to extensive scientific analysis over the decades, with experts attempting to determine its authenticity. Photography experts have examined the original negative for signs of double exposure, manipulation, or other techniques that could have produced the ghostly image. While some skeptics have suggested that the photograph could have been created through various photographic tricks available in the 1930s, others have argued that the technical analysis supports its authenticity. The photographers themselves maintained until their deaths that they had not manipulated the image in any way, and that they had simply captured what Shira had seen with his own eyes. The debate continues to this day, with believers pointing to the photograph as proof of supernatural existence, while skeptics argue that it represents either a photographic accident or an elaborate hoax. Even into the modern era, reports of the Brown Lady continue to emerge from Raynham Hall. Staff members, family members, and visitors have reported encounters with the phantom figure well into the 21st century. The current Marquess Townsend has acknowledged the ghost as part of the hall's history, though sightings have become less frequent in recent decades. Some paranormal investigators suggest that the Brown Lady's appearances may be cyclical, with periods of high activity followed by years of relative quiet. Modern ghost hunters have visited Raynham Hall with sophisticated equipment, including electromagnetic field detectors, digital cameras, and audio recording devices, hoping to capture new evidence of the Brown Lady's presence. While some claim to have recorded unexplained phenomena, none have matched the dramatic clarity of the 1936 photograph. While the Brown Lady remains the most famous spirit associated with Raynham Hall, she is not the only supernatural resident reported within the mansion's walls. Visitors and staff have reported encounters with other ghostly figures, including a young boy who is said to run through the corridors laughing, and an elderly gentleman in 18th century dress who appears in the library. Some have suggested that these additional spirits are members of the Townsend family from various periods in the hall's history, unable to leave their beloved ancestral home. The combination of multiple hauntings has led some paranormal researchers to classify Raynham Hall as a portal or thin place, where the boundary between the living and dead world is particularly permeable. Over the years, numerous theories have been proposed to explain the Brown Lady phenomenon. Believers in the supernatural argue that Dorothy Walpole's tragic imprisonment and death created such powerful emotional trauma that her spirit became permanently bound to Raynham Hall. Psychological explanations suggest that the power of suggestion, combined with the hall's atmospheric Victorian Gothic interior, creates conditions conducive to hallucinations and false memories. Some researchers have proposed that the Brown Lady sightings could be examples of stone tape theory, where traumatic events are somehow recorded in the physical environment and replayed under certain conditions. Environmental factors, such as infrasound created by the building's structure or electromagnetic fields, have also been suggested as potential causes for the reported phenomena. The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall has become one of the most recognizable ghost stories in popular culture, inspiring countless books, documentaries, and films. The famous 1936 photograph has been reproduced thousands of times and remains one of the most widely circulated images of alleged supernatural activity. The story has helped establish many of the conventions of modern ghost lore, including the idea that spirits are most commonly seen on staircases and that they appear wearing clothing from their lifetime. Raynham Hall itself has embraced its ghostly reputation, with the current family acknowledging the Brown Lady as part of the hall's rich history. The haunting has undoubtedly contributed to the hall's fame and continues to attract visitors from around the world who hope to catch a glimpse of the legendary phantom. Nearly 2 centuries after the first recorded sighting, the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall remains one of Britain's most enduring and compelling ghost stories, Whether one believes in the supernatural or not, the consistency of the sightings, the quality of the witnesses, and the famous photograph continue to intrigue and mystify. The story of Lady Dorothy Walpole serves as a reminder of how tragedy and injustice can leave lasting impressions that transcend death itself. As long as Raynham Hall stands, the legend of the Brown Lady will continue to captivate those who dare to explore the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. In a world increasingly dominated by science and technology, the Brown Lady represents our enduring fascination with the unknown and our deep-seated belief that some stories are too powerful to be explained away. And there you have it, the haunting tale of Raynham Hall's Brown Lady, one of the most documented and photographed ghosts in history. What do you think? Is that 1936 photograph genuine evidence of the supernatural, or could there be a more earthly explanation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed diving into this spine-chilling piece of story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want to see more haunting stories like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our explorations into the world's most mysterious and supernatural locations. We've got so many more incredible ghost stories, haunted places, and unexplained phenomena coming your way. Have you ever experienced something supernatural yourself? Or maybe you know of a haunted location that deserves investigation? Drop your suggestions in the comments. I read every single one, and your ideas often become future videos. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes the most unbelievable stories turn out to be the most real. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next mysterious adventure.